Genesis 1:14 through 19, creation of the heavenly bodies. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens, to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be lights in the firmament of the heavens, to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, a fourth day. Overview. The heavenly bodies are the receptacles of the primordial light which God created on the first day, John of Damascus. Their function is to rule the days, the seasons, and the years, Basil, Cyril of Jerusalem. Their signs fix distinct intervals of time, Augustine. The order of creation is precisely defined, Chrysostom, with primordial light preceding the sun, Ambrose. After the stars, the sun and the moon were created, the day and the night were divided among the heavenly bodies. The heavenly bodies must be observed as natural phenomena, but not in order to forecast the future, Augustine. The sun symbolizes the divine goodness, Pseudo-Dionysius. The sun and the moon symbolize Christ and the Church. The stars are symbols of the saints and the prophets, Origen. 1:14 through 15, lights in the firmament, nature of the heavenly bodies, John of Damascus. Fire is one of the four elements. It is light and more buoyant than the others, and it both burns and gives light. It was made by the Creator on the first day, for sacred scripture says, "And God said, Be light made, and light was made." According to what some say, fire is the same thing as light. And into the luminaries of the firmament the Creator put the primordial light, not that he was in want of any other light, but that that particular light might not remain idle. For the luminary is not the light itself, but its receptacle. Their function, Basil the Great. Let them serve, he says, for the fixing of days, not for making days, but for ordering the days. For day and night are earlier than the generation of the luminaries. This the psalm declares to us when it says, "He placed the sun to rule the day, the moon and the stars to rule the night." How then does the sun rule the day? Because whenever the sun, carrying the light around with it, rises above our horizon, it puts an end to the darkness and brings us the day. Therefore one would not err if he would define the day as air lightened by the sun, or as the measure of time in which the sun tarries in the hemisphere above the earth. But the sun and the moon were also appointed to be for the years. The moon, when it has completed its course 12 times, measures a year, except that it frequently needs an intercalary month for the accurate determination of the seasons, as the Hebrews and the most ancient Greeks formerly measured the year. The solar year is the return of the sun from a certain sign to that same sign in its regular revolution. Well-ordered movements, Cyril of Jerusalem. Men ought to have been astonished and amazed not only at the arrangement of the sun and moon, but also at the well-ordered movements of the stars and their unfettered courses, and the timely rising of each of them, how some are signs of summer, others of winter, how some indicate the time for sowing, others the time of navigation. What preceded the sun, Ambrose? Look first on the firmament of heaven, which was made before the sun. Look first on the earth, which began to be visible and was already formed before the sun put in its appearance. Look at the plants of the earth, which preceded in time the light of the sun. The bramble preceded the sun. The blade of grass is older than the moon. Therefore do not believe that object to be a god, to which the gifts of God are seen to be preferred. 3 days have passed. No one, meanwhile, has looked for the sun, yet the brilliance of light has been evidence everywhere. For the day, too, has its light, which is itself the precursor of the sun. The order of creation, Chrysostom. For that reason, the blessed Moses, inspired by the divine Spirit, teaches us with great precision, lest we fall victim to the same things as they, instead of being able to know clearly both the sequence of created things and how each thing was created. You see, if God, in his care for our salvation, had not directed the tongue of the biblical author in this way, it would have been sufficient to say that God made heaven and earth, the sea, and living things, and not add the order of the days, nor what was created first and what later. Exact meaning of signs, Augustine. We should not interpret the signs as something other than times, for Scripture is now speaking of these times that by their distinct intervals convey to us that eternity remains immutable above them, so that time might appear as a sign, that is, as a vestige of eternity. Likewise, when it adds and 4 days and 4 years, it shows of what times it is speaking. These days come about by the revolution of the fixed stars, and from this it becomes obvious when the sun completes its starry course in a particular year. 1:16 through 18, greater and lesser lights, the days before and after the creation of the suns and the moon, Augustine. The Manichaeans ask how it could be that the heavenly bodies, that is, the sun and the moon and the stars, were made on the fourth day. How could the 3 previous days have passed without the sun? For we now see that a day passes when the rising and setting of the sun, with the rising and setting of the sun, while night comes to us in the sun's absence when it returns to east from the other side of the world. We answer them that the previous 3 days could each have been calculated by as great a period of time as that through which the sun passes, for when it rises in the east until it returns again to the east. This would be our answer if we were not held back by the words, and evening came and morning came, for we see that this cannot now take place without the movement of the sun. Hence we are left with the interpretation that in that period of time, the divisions between the works were called evening because of the completion of the work that was done, and morning because of the beginning of the work to come. Scripture says this after the likeness of human works, since they generally begin in the morning and end at the evening. Then Scripture says, and God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. Again they ask, how did God previously divide the light and the darkness, if he made the heavenly bodies on this, the fourth day? Therefore these words, to divide the light from the darkness, mean to divide from among themselves the light and the darkness, so that the day is given to the sun, and the night to the moon and the other stars. The sun and the night had already been distinguished, but not yet in relation to the heavenly bodies. The stars do not forecast the future, Augustine. Everyone understands that there is a great difference between astrological prediction and observing the stars as natural phenomenon in the way that farmers and sailors do, either to verify geographical areas or to steer their course somewhere, as pilots of ships do, and travelers making their way through the sandy wastes of the south with no sure path, or to explain some point of doctrine by mentioning some of the stars as a useful illustration. As I said, there is a great difference between these practical customs and the superstitions of men who study the stars not to forecast the weather or to find their way or for spiritual parables, but in an effort to peer into the predestined outcome of events. The sun as echo of the divine goodness, Pseudo-Dionysius. The great shining, ever-lighting sun is the apparent image of the divine goodness, a distant echo of the good. It illuminates whatever is capable of receiving its light, and yet it never loses the utter fullness of its light. It sends its shining beams all around the visible world, and if anything fails to receive them, the fault lies not in the weakness or defect of the spreading light, but in the unsuitability of whatever is unable to have a share in light. Sun and moon are signs of the true light, origin. As those lights of heaven that we see have been set for signs and seasons and days and years, that they might give light from the firmament of heaven to those who are on the earth, so also Christ, illuminating his church, gives signs by his precepts, that one might know how, when the sign has been received, to escape the wrath to come, lest that day overtake him like a thief, but that rather he can reach the acceptable year of the Lord. Christ therefore is the true light which enlightens every man coming into this world. From his light, the church itself also, having been enlightened, is made the light of the world, enlightening those who are in darkness, as also Christ himself testifies to his disciples, saying, "You are the light of the world." The stars as symbols of origin. Just as the sun and the moon are said to be the great lights in the firmament of heaven, so also are Christ and the church in us. But since God also placed stars in the firmament, let us see what are also stars in us, that is, in the heaven of our hearts. Moses is a star in us, which shines and enlightens us by his acts, and so are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, David, Daniel, and all to whom the Holy Scriptures testify that they pleased God. For just as stars differ from star in glory, so also each of the saints, according to his own greatness, sheds his light. upon us.